Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Pro Democracy Pod. We have two very special guests, both excellent journalists. I guess Jeb is also an academic and recently more of an activist. Jeb shut down the second speech that George W. Bush gave in Los Angeles. What was it, last week or the week before? Following Mike Preisner's disruption. So the two speeches that George W. Bush was set to give both got disrupted by anti-war activists, anti-war voices. So we're thrilled to have Jeb on. We also have Kevin Gosztola. Am I saying your last name correctly?
Yeah, you are.
Perfect. All right. So we have Kevin. Kevin is he's the editor of Shadowproof. You're the editor? Is that right? Founder?
Yes, I am.
How do you? What are your journalistic pronouns?
Yeah, I don't have them. Well, I actually do have them in my profile. They are, and I also curate the Dissenter newsletter, which has all these updates on WikiLeaks and the prosecution against Assange.
Yeah, so Kevin is one of the best journalists that are like always covering the Julian Assange case, and we're so thankful for him for doing that. So recently, Yahoo News, Michael Isikoff and some other journalists, I think Michael Isikoff is the one that everyone's familiar with, put out this very long investigation into the CIA black operations campaign, the plotting behind it against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. However, El País, the Spanish newspaper, had covered a bit of it, and Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone had also covered it. So I want to start off by asking you, Kevin, what did we know, and what did we just learn this week?
Yeah, so I do think that this Yahoo News report adds quite a bit of information and detail to our understanding about the CIA's war on WikiLeaks. But like Max, as well as people over at El País and many of the attorneys that are part of the Assange legal team, it's been clear for several years that there was a war on WikiLeaks by the CIA. I put together a piece that I ran on my page at medium.com called The CIA's War on WikiLeaks. It just had a narrative. And it started with the way that CIA Director Mike Pompeo, in his first public remarks, singled out WikiLeaks as a non-state hostile intelligence agency. And I noted, this was something I wrote back in October of 2019. This was after he was indicted, arrested, expelled from the Ecuador embassy. He was in jail at that time. I noted that the Vault 7 materials, when they were published, that was the catalyst that led the CIA to basically decide, we have to do something. We have to retaliate and seek revenge against Assange. And it turns out that that's exactly what happened within the agency. And from El País's reporting and from some of the proceedings in the extradition case, we know that UC Global, this private security company in Spain, was contracted to provide security at the Ecuador embassy. And while they were there, they were also working on behalf of the CIA. Although I will say, before this report, a lot of journalists would just say U.S. intelligence. So this seems to be like our first confirmation that the CIA is the alphabet agency that was working with UC Global. And the Yahoo report would seem to confirm that the audio and the video feeds were being passed along from the embassy to the CIA so that they could use whatever they were collecting to further their operations targeting members of WikiLeaks. Now, you say Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone, who I know has been someone you've done some work with. He's a good friend of ours. He did an excellent report documenting the role of Sheldon Adelson before he croaked, and the Las Vegas Sands front operation that was basically providing cover for the CIA in order to engage in this collaboration with UC Global So he was in on the spying operation through David Morales, the director of UC Global, who's actually facing a criminal case in Spain right now. But David Morales made trips to Las Vegas to work with these security people within Las Vegas Sands, who if I'm vaguely recalling Max's story, there's some connections to Israeli military or Israeli security people, which adds another dimension. And this stuff doesn't really make it into the Yahoo News story because there's a different component to what's being reported here. The new material in the Yahoo News report focuses on the internal discussions that were reportedly happening within the Trump administration. And according to Aaron Mate's interview that I just posted for Pushback, Zach Dorfman was actually the lead reporter for Yahoo News. Michael Isikoff was in on it. He's notable because as of late, because he had done a lot of anti-Trump administration reporting that furthered Russiagate conspiracies, a lot of which he's backed away from. And then Sean Naylor also worked with him on this report, and it was sourced to over 30 plus former intelligence officials, former Trump administration officials who were part of these discussions or observed these discussions or knew that these were taking place, where Mike Pompeo basically said that they were going to redefine what WikiLeaks was as a hostile entity. But then what's really important is these very detailed, the sources gave very detailed information about the offensive operations that they would take against WikiLeaks, things like trying to sabotage their digital infrastructure, stealing their electronic devices, pitting people against each other, planting false damaging information. Some of these tactics are obviously ones that the CIA has employed throughout the last decades of their existence as an agency. But the fact that these were authorized against WikiLeaks, I can't say that there had been confirmation up to this point. And then the idea that rendition operation was considered for bringing Julian Assange to the US and to do it without an indictment. I mean, they were planning to kidnap or abduct him before the Justice Department even indicted him. And of course, then we have the fact that sketches of plans for bringing, for assassinating Assange were put together. So I'll end there, but the idea that Mike Pompeo was so obsessed with revenge against Julian Assange that they had these assassination plots. They had conversations about whether they could get the legal authority to carry all of these extrajudicial operations out against Assange, who's a journalist, and then eventually the Justice Department, according to the story, were just so appalled and frightened about what the CIA might do next that in the end, it led them to actually charge him much sooner than they were planning, which suggests that there was improper political pressure. I mean, all of this just confirms the political nature of this case, which it's actually really good for Julian Assange's case in the High Court of Justice in the UK, because there's a whole lot that the legal team can argue now with some of this evidence.
Yeah. I mean, sorry. I was going to ask, do we think that this is going to actually make an impact on the legal case? And if so, what kind of impact? Because it does kind of look like they could put this to their advantage, but I also kind of worry that nothing will change fundamentally because there's just been so many miscarriages of justice already in this case.
Yeah, I don't think the cynicism is that misplaced, but I do believe that the things that have been revealed are actually very, as I said before, useful to the legal team. And it's in two key respects. I mean, one, Judge Vanessa Baretzer, when she issued her decision, though she ended up ultimately denying it, and that was the right outcome, and it was good for Julian Assange. One thing she refused to treat as credible was the argument that the hostility within the CIA translated to improper political pressure on the Justice Department to charge him. And we now know from the story that there could not be more indication that the Justice Department was leaned on to prosecute because intelligence agents wanted that to take place. So it's a political prosecution. It's rather clear cut, and they can stand before the High Court of Justice and say that this wasn't a case brought because, you know, simply someone was accused of violating the law. It's because the political makeup of this administration shifted to where they didn't care about trampling on the First Amendment. They didn't really give a damn about press freedom principles. And so they were going after WikiLeaks, intending to destroy the organization and to bring Julian Assange to the US for a trial. And so then with that, because this appeal hearing is going to be all about whether it's truly going to be oppressive to Julian Assange's physical and mental health to bring him to the United States and put him in a prison and detain him and then hold him and then have him go through a trial. One thing they can argue is that this shows he could never get a fair trial in the United States. And it also shows that we could never trust the authorities to treat him humanely because of their hostility to Julian Assange, because they plotted to kill him. They plotted to kidnap him. And right now, the alleged source of the Vault 7 leaks is in a hellhole in a prison that's actually being shut down by the Justice Department because of complaints against it, the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York. This alleged source, Josh Schulte, is waiting for a second trial. The first one ended with a mistrial, and the Justice Department was not able to prove that he's the source of the Vault 7 documents, but yet they continue to treat him very abusively and keep him locked up in this like dungeon in the Metropolitan Correctional Center. And he's under SAMs. He's under special administrative measures authorized by the Attorney General. And this is exactly what was likely to happen to Julian Assange if he was brought to the United States, that he would be abused and mistreated in this manner. And so I think that a lot of what's in this Yahoo report and what they're seeing can be very constructive to furthering what the legal team hopes to get out of this appeal hearing, which is they hope to debunk everything that the U.S. is throwing at them in the way of, prolonging this case. I mean, simply put, if Joe Biden wanted to salvage any credibility that these prosecutors have, he would just drop the charges right now because there's not much basis for him to argue anything against Julian Assange.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, Kevin, I have a question for you, and then we'll give Jeb a chance to comment on the Assange case. But, I know, and I feel kind of bad asking this question of a journalist, but knowing that you are blacklisted from the pages of The Intercept, I don't feel so bad about it. But so obviously Michael Isikoff and the others, the Yahoo News report, I should say, their reporting was extensive and very well researched. It took a lot of time for them to conduct this report. So I'm wondering, because we see rewrites of that article in The Intercept, in Jacobin, but we didn't really see a whole lot about Julian Assange in the years prior. I mean, even though a lot of this information about the intelligence campaign against Assange has been out. So is this like they're running these stories because it's now a stronger story? Or is this a case of, well, this kind of establishment journalist put out this story, so it's safe? What's your take?
Well, Chip Gibbons did the piece over at Jacobin, and he's a friend and colleague of mine.
Oh, Chip is great. No, he's a friend of mine as well.
And then I'm not sure who authored the piece at The Intercept, but believe it or not, it actually gave us a nice bit of context about the complicity of Congress, something that I had overlooked, which is that there was actually a bill that people in the Senate and the House voted on that endorsed the view that WikiLeaks should be redefined as a hostile intelligence service. So all of the people in the Congress, when they voted on like a defense authorization bill, they were stripping away the press freedom rights of WikiLeaks and all the staff members and saying, all right, CIA, go after them. We don't care. We'll let you do that. And that just happened right under our noses, and we didn't have any debate about it, and nobody really cared. There was an objection from Senator Ron Wyden, the only senator who usually challenges the national security state. Of course, very famously caught James Clapper in a lie about NSA surveillance of Americans, but everybody else is no problem whatsoever with this. I think that, when you think of, so one thing I will say about this story from Yahoo News is that all the sources who spoke to him could have spoken out a lot sooner. All the information that is in this report is fairly old. We're talking about something that happened in 2017 and 2018. And this is 2 or 3 years old, if not older. And you could have had this story printed in the news media right after he was indicted, because all of this has been known to these sources. Why they're speaking out now, I really do not know. If there may be something going on internally that we're not going to know about until like 3 or 4 months from now. Maybe there are debates going on about abandoning this case, because it does seem like a lost cause when you look at what's been unfolding. But I'm really disappointed that there haven't been more establishment journalists who have been willing to dig into this the way that, well, if you didn't get the documents from El País, then you didn't do anything on this, and you haven't been pursuing the truth about the corruption in this case against Julian Assange. So you haven't asked key questions about what the CIA was doing to attack journalists, in addition to Assange, who went and visited him. I mean, they had their electronics stolen. People tried to steal batteries from cell phones who were working for UC Global. I mean, there's all kinds of shit that was really awful. And then the FBI now, we know, had this informant named Siggy Durdarson, who's a pathological liar, a sociopath, and a pedophile who is just a severely mentally ill person, but just not even a credible source of information. However, they're using him to form a part of the basis of their computer crime offense against Julian Assange right now. And we know it's all built around a lie. And then the FBI stole privileged materials. They stole an entire archive from Julian Assange that he had in the Ecuador embassy. So after he was arrested, they took this material from him, and he doesn't have it to put together his case. They have confidential health data, medical data from him that they confiscated as well. And none of this is anything that reporters follow up on and investigate. And there's not a lot of questions being asked by people in progressive media either. And I think it's just because there's a narrative about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks that pretty much a lot of people accepted that he was a Trump supporter without any proof or evidence whatsoever. They accepted the scurrilous allegations around him being some kind of Russian plant, that he was like working on behalf of the Russians to try and defeat Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. Since he was receiving messages from the Trump campaign, they thought that like that's evidence that they're working together, even though he pretty much hated Roger Stone and didn't want to have anything to do with him. And like, it's pretty clear that nothing ever went anywhere. Like, Roger Stone's lying to the public about what he knows about WikiLeaks, and people don't even care about that. They just act like, well, they must be working together because they had communications. And the politics of WikiLeaks didn't change. Something within our culture shifted. WikiLeaks has been pretty consistent over the last 10 to 12 years that it's been doing its most impactful work. It's the people around it that have changed. The politics, as the pendulum swings between a Democratic president and Republican president, continue to create these contradictions and dilemmas that we've all been dealing with. Obviously, like, we see them, and I think this is where Jeb might want to get in, because like when we talk about war, the war on terrorism, we talk about Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, the drone program, the kill lists that are there for the drone warfare. When we talk about the war on whistleblowers, when we dig through mass surveillance programs, we know that like all of this, as it's been exposed and detailed in the media, we've seen politics become really bizarre, where sometimes Democrats are opposed to it, sometimes they're not. Sometimes Republicans surprise us and they're against it, but sometimes they're not if they don't want to be on the bad side of Donald Trump. And that's what Julian Assange has had to deal with, and why he doesn't really have any allies, because of the tribalism, the political tribalism in the US, that in the end, most everyone is still an imperialist and they don't really care about democracy.
Yeah, I can. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, before really I say anything, well, thanks for having us on the show. But I really wanted to, I've never met or spoken to Kevin before in person. So I just wanted to really sincerely thank him for all the work that he's done. His day-to-day reports on the court, you know, when you were there in the UK, I was reading those every day. And I think just for like his history, the documentation that you've provided, I mean, it's like, I view it as, you know, one of, if not the most important story, like of our generation. And it's, you know, my hat's off to you for all the work that you've done.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, sure. And and I've sort of had a front row seat to it in 2000. It was 2010 or 2011. I was given access to, or I was able to read a number of the Cablegate cables on Haiti before they were opened up, you know, when they were trying to go through them and research them, and Cablegate, before I guess the Guardian leaked. Was it the Guardian that leaked some information eventually?
David Lee posted the password in that fucking idiot. He put the password as the like chapter title just because he thought it would be cool. And then an encrypted file was completely lost.
And so is he an editor for The Guardian, or?
Well, he's retired now, but he was an editor at The Guardian. Yeah, and he should have been. So Stefania Marizzi is a really great Italian journalist. Mm-hmm. She had a statement that she entered into the record for the extradition hearing, which if you go find, it's really good. It has a really good takedown of how they're truly responsible for everything that Julian Assange is being blamed for when it comes to those cables, and how confidential human sources and informants and activists working with the State Department and other agencies were vulnerable because of what he did. I mean, all these journalists, Anyways,
that's what I've always thought with. I mean, it's such. I mean, even me watching it, you know, and us alternative media journalists and activists and scholars, it's like hard for us to keep up, you know, reading it. So it's such in history, you know, it moves by so quickly. I feel like the role of the Guardian and some of these other outlets, like their role in sort of like helping to conspire against WikiLeaks and the leaks and things that they put out has sort of been like forgotten by a lot of people. And I think when the history is written, that's real important that's in there. But so yeah, I published a book in 2012 with a monthly review that looked at paramilitary violence in Haiti before and after the 2004 coup against Jean-Bertrand Aristide. And in 2005, I filed like 20 Freedom of Information Act requests with the U.S. State Department for their cables between the U.S. Embassy and the State Department headquarters in Washington, D.C. And at the time, the FOIA officers told me it was like one of the biggest FOIA requests they had ever had. and because I had like tons of terms and all these years I was looking at, and I ended up getting the cables in around 2010. Actually, my mom, because I had put my mom's address on it in 2005, and she was still there. And then suddenly, I got like these like 8 huge cardboard boxes from the State Department, and shortly thereafter, I can't remember if it was 2010 or 2011, through a Haitian newspaper, I was able to look at the WikiLeaks, the cables. And it was so amazing because the cables they had on Haiti were like right, like I got stuff that was like right before what they had. So like I was able to put all these together to get a much bigger picture for the book that I put out. But so much of the information I got, I wouldn't have been able to put out there without the WikiLeaks documents. And I mean it documented like brutal violence by paramilitary organizations and U.S. support connections with these groups. And I think there were a lot of other documents that showed even worse, activities that were ongoing. So we really saw underneath the hood of this worldwide, empire of bases and activities and covert operations that the United States has. So I just view it as like we have to defend him, and we have to shine a light on what's going on and the injustice that's been foisted upon him. I think I had a few questions for Kevin. So I watched Aaron Mate's interview that he just had with Michael Isikoff, and he played a short clip by Yanis Varoufakis, the former economic minister. And there's a clip where he talks about the conversation he had with Julian, and how Julian basically says that they were not Russians that provided these documents. I believe it was for Vault 7, and that it was another source that was
those are for the Clinton campaign emails.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, for the Clinton campaign emails. And I just thought it was interesting because Michael Isikoff still sort of like really like he really still accepts like the narrative that Russia had provided that information, and the fact that Mueller never interviewed Assange, all these sorts of things, like it didn't seem to be a big deal to him or to mainstream U.S. journalists. So that to me is amazing. But actually the main question I had for you though was in this new Yahoo article, one of the things they mention is creating divisions within WikiLeaks. And this is a long time U.S. intelligence strategy in different parts of the world or against groups they want to target. I was trying to think back over the last decade about WikiLeaks and the different divisions that have occurred where people have kind of like split off or, advised Hollywood movies attacking WikiLeaks, or the division with Laura Poitras and some of the different media outlets. I was trying to think about the different divisions that have occurred. And I was just interesting thinking about that with this revelation, how U.S. intelligence could have amplified or, helped to build some of these divisions. I know this is like totally speculative, but it's interesting to think about.
Well, I would be really careful because I don't want anybody to be like labeled a snitch who actually isn't one for the government.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is worth thinking about the fact that there have been. Well, let's just keep it generic. I mean, we know that there's been a lot of infighting within WikiLeaks over the last decade, and perhaps now, to some degree, it may not all be Julian Assange's brittle personality. It could actually be people within the organization who were disruptors that were trying to make it difficult for the organization to function. or it could be people who were in on plots. And by the way, this CIA operation that we're talking about, whenever it exactly started, it seems that it happened around 2017-ish, maybe 2016, maybe as early as 2016. But the report, one thing I haven't said yet is that the thing that I really appreciate about the article is that it shows that when WikiLeaks made the decision to help Edward Snowden leave Hong Kong to get to, he was trying to go to Latin America. When they did that, the Obama administration decided that the CIA could go back to targeting him because even though they weren't going to prosecute him for the disclosures of 2010, the cables, the war logs, the Guantanamo prisoner files, etc., they said, well, now it's a valid intelligence target. He's helping who we view as a fugitive. And so you can get back at it, CIA. And they did. And so when you think about that, and then add in the fact that the FBI had this operation, which, this doesn't get thrown in with the coverage of the CIA because it's just too much. I mean, you can barely keep track of the CIA narrative. What if we throw in the FBI narrative? Then that gets really hard to handle. But it's worth trying to juggle the two at the same time because the FBI basically destroyed the private intelligence firm Stratfor when they were seeking to entrap Julian Assange and so that they could have a case against him because they had Sabu and they had other people who were hackers that they got to work for them. And they were targeting this firm as like sort of like a honeypot for the hoping that Julian Assange would do something to where they could then, have a charge to stick to him. And they basically sacrificed a firm of amateur hack private security types so that they could further their war on WikiLeaks.
I didn't realize that the Stratfor leaks came out of. So you're saying that they came out of people that were working with the FBI?
Well, I'm saying that they sort of set it up like they wanted. Like Sabu was talking to people about hacking into Stratfor and giving WikiLeaks the files, and they wanted Julian Assange to engage in part of that so that they could then nail him. And they actually wanted him to buy the information off of these hackers so that they could go after him and charge him if he bought the information. If he didn't do that. So they were trying to set him up. And that's what you get from this whole article too, is the sense that how they view WikiLeaks is not as journalists, but they want to call them information brokers. This is also in the article that they wanted to discredit or have the ability to target people like Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras when they were doing their work for Edward Snowden. And they want to be able to have a authority to go after them. And so that was the way they defined them, as information brokers. And they truly believe that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, or they want to believe it, I don't know if they actually do or not, but in order to justify what they're doing, they want to treat them as people who are selling secrets. And that's not how they work. I mean,
it seems like this. It seems like this would be sort of like the tip of the iceberg, though, of what we know. Because when they say that they're targeting this group for divisions and they see them as a hostile enemy intelligence network, I mean, they could be like things to just not. I'm not even saying like people in the organization are purposely trying to destroy it or that they're infiltrators or whatever. I'm saying that in these intelligence agencies could be trying to do things to create stress in these people's lives, financial problems. I mean, they could have been targeting them in different ways that would create sort of eventually kind of create fissures and rifts in the or like we don't even know. I mean, if we look at past intelligence operations we know about, like COINTELPRO and other things, there was targeting, family relationships, all sorts of things. So I just wanted to say that maybe it's just the tip of the iceberg, what we know.
So we're live on Periscope at the moment. Kevin, it sounds like you wanted to address that, so I'll let you do that. I'm just going to really quick announce that we're going to be ending the Periscope and moving exclusively over to Rockfin. So we invite you guys all to please join us over there to watch the remainder of the episode. We have more to talk about with Assange. We're going to have Jeb talk about disrupting George W. Bush, some politics of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So thanks for joining so far. We hope to see you over there. And you can go ahead, Kevin.
So what I was going to add is there's a really interesting section worth pulling out here, because while they have this attitude that essentially they should shut down WikiLeaks and disrupt it, and that they're information brokers and they're trying to steal American secrets, they actually have a lot of respect for the people within the organization and how they do OPSEC. And they say that they don't think it would be an easy task in order to track the movements and communications of Assange and other top WikiLeaks figures by tasking more on the tech side and recruiting more on the human side. So they say they didn't actually think it would be that fruitful to have like human infiltrators in WikiLeaks, because WikiLeaks associates were, quote, super paranoid people. And the CIA estimated that only a handful of individuals had access to the Vault 7 materials the agency wanted to retrieve, said a former intelligence official. Those individuals employed security measures that made obtaining the information difficult, including keeping it on encrypted drives that they either carried on their persons or locked in safes. So what you're describing, in the past, like let's say in the 1960s or 1970s, it would have been very easy to deploy these kinds of infiltrators. But if you're doing everything on like a digital setting, and you have all of this encryption and you have all of these ways of protecting the information and limiting who has access, then you're gonna need like the person you send to do this is going to have to be like one of the world-class infiltrators that you've ever trained to conduct this job. Like what I'm describing is the scenario for a Hollywood movie, essentially, right? Like they're gonna have to come up with like the best CIA double agent ever.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I mean, if they had everybody within 3 blocks, and this is like, I mean, I just think the amount of resources at the disposal of the U.S. government, there's a lot that could have happened that we don't know about. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Do you have anything, Mila, to add?
No, I mean, this is this case has fascinated me for a while, especially as a law student. And so I'm very grateful to hear Kevin's and Jeb's perspective on this. I have been feeling very cynical about it. And in light of this report, like, I guess this was kind of already addressed, but like my immediate reaction was kind of like, okay, well, now maybe because it's been put in a more like quote unquote respectable publication then, and I don't mean that like to throw shade at the gray zone. I think it's more just that like unfortunately that's how media works, right? And so like a part of me kind of has more hope, but then another part of me is kind of like, I don't know, because like I acknowledge that it is a political, I think people know it's a political prosecution, and it just kind of seems more like it's like the powers that be are kind of saying, yes, we know it is a political prosecution and we're rubbing it in your face. Yeah. And that's kind of what a lot of international law has or transnational legal cases kind of look like to me. Is it's not even saying, oh no, it's not political anymore. It's kind of more like, yes, it is political. What are you going to do about it? And I'm also kind of wondering if any other powers that are, counter to the US are going to also start flexing their muscles back or use this case in that respect, or if they're not going to touch it either. And anyway, those are my sort of closing thoughts on Assange. But
well, if I could just say before we move on to talk about Jeb and his badass disruption of George W. Bush's speech, that the open question is, what will other media organizations do with this reporting? Because the door has been blown pretty wide open for others to come in and do follow-ups, to contact their own sources and figure out what they saw. I mean, like, did you hear this? Did you not hear this? Is this false? Is this true? So we haven't had that. One thing that was really good is there really wasn't any pushback in the mainstream media to what the Yahoo News report was saying about the CIA and their plots to kill Julian Assange. I actually got quite a bit of establishment news coverage as far as like just reporting out the core of the story. Like, it made headlines on CBS News and CNN. I think Fox News even covered it. It made it to MSNBC. It was on Peacock. If anybody watches that, I don't know. But the clip of Mehdi Hassan gets shared, so someone on the internet is watching it. But I mean, it made it to people's news programs that they were saying, headline, CIA plotted to kill WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, with no like caveats. Just like, that's the headline: CIA plotted to kill WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. And that's, I think, really important. And then, Mike Pompeo, his response was to go around giving these non-denial denials. And then he ends up on Megyn Kelly's podcast on Sirius XM. And she actually asks a couple decent follow-up questions to where he ends up conceding that parts of the story are true. And then he basically defends and says, like, he'll make no apologies for the CIA. Yeah, we thought it was a hostile entity, which tells you that like the CIA would go to war against the organization. And also in this interview, he says, hey, you know what? I would like to see the Justice Department prosecute all the sources of this Yahoo News report, which would be 30 plus people. That would be like a mass prosecution. It'd be like the J20 of leak prosecutions cases, of just like jamming the
or
Eastern
J6.
District. Yeah, or
Sorry.
J6, whatever, if you wanted to keep it more current, we'll say the J6. Yeah.
I just want to be a little even-handed. I mean, I was arrested with the J20 protesters, but I think that for all the lack of sympathy in the mainstream media that we experienced at the time, I think it's 10 times worse now with the J6 people. So, I do try to keep it even-handed. But yeah, continue. I'm sorry.
But he's calling for massive leak prosecutions, as he's acting like, oh no, I didn't engage in this. I wasn't obsessed with Assange. I didn't go home and wake up the next day thinking about like, when are we going to finally nail the bastard? Like, obviously, you have just confirmed that this is all true, because as Ben Weisner, say what you will about the ACLU, but this is someone I trust on this, who's been really reliable. He said, look, the government does not prosecute people for leaks if they are lying or spreading false information. Only if they are spreading credible, classified information will they then turn around and try and prosecute you for leaks. So like all these whistleblowers that ever got cracked down on, we're telling the truth. They weren't making up bullshit about people in power, and that's why they ended up being crushed. So the fact that Mike Pompeo wants to just go after all of these people says that I think there's something there, and people should continue to dig.
And it seems like he also kind of has an incentive to, as we get closer to the next federal election, like there's speculation that he might run for president. And I kind of wonder as well if he thinks doing this kind of prosecution or acting tough on people who are, even like sympathetic to Assange is going to help him gain
or work
some
against
sort of,
him. Or work against him.
I hope
really
it would work against him. But yeah, you never know these days. So
I mean, he was at. I'll let us move on, but he was at Hillsdale College in Southern Michigan the day after this report came out. And Hillsdale College was profiled during the Trump administration because it has a pretty high student population of conservative students and like a pretty good right-wing presence, so to speak, of like student groups that are right-wing oriented. And he was there, and a student who was, he may or may not have been part of a conservative group on campus, I don't know, but he asked Mike Pompeo about the way the CIA was acting towards Assange. And like he said, look, don't we have a problem in our institutions where people are not accountable and these agencies can just do whatever they would like? And he had to answer that question from somebody. And that was a question that was coming from like not the left, but the opposite of the political spectrum.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. Real quick, I want to point out today there was a new report from the Office of the Inspector General that really, I haven't looked too deeply into the report, but what I understand from it is that it identified a lot of new problems with the FISA court. So, I mean, I think with all of the FBI, and I was called a conspiracy theorist years ago for talking about this kind of stuff, but with all of the FBI malpractice that went on during the Trump campaign. I mean, Trump at the time when he was campaigning was saying that he loves WikiLeaks. So I think that the kind of current of the Republican Party is very distrustful of, the intelligence agencies. So I think that will probably work against Pompeo. And, I just don't think he's got the kind of charisma that Trump had. I would be interesting to see them run against each other in a primary. I'm not so sure. A lot of people are saying that they suspect Pompeo will run. I'm not so sure personally. But what I will say about,
he was like losing weight, so I was like,
is that right?
Look, president.
He did lose a lot of weight.
He didn't. I saw him in person a few months ago, and he didn't look too different. But one thing,
he's face tuning.
One thing, he has like this really weird kind of turtley look.
Yeah, no, he looks evil for sure.
But I talked about this on our first episode. I went to this summit, this religious freedom summit. It was really a conference on regime change in China in DC, and Pompeo was there, and the co-chair of the summit, Sam Brownback, who they were, I believe him and Pompeo were both senators from Kansas. Yeah, Kansas. Together, they have a long history together, and they call each other friends. But one thing that Sam Brownback said about Mike Pompeo was that if Donald Trump had ordered an invasion of China, that Mike Pompeo would have told Trump, send me in with the first, round of boys to be on the front line. He says, and another comment about Pompeo was, this is a man who teaches Sunday school and drives a tank. So, he's a really, he's, I think, crazier and more dangerous than Trump personally, just because he's a little bit smarter and he's just way more psycho. I mean, Trump came out about, when asked for comment on this Assange story, Trump said that he felt bad about how Assange was treated. Now, how true is that? I don't put that much weight into that, just because, I know for a fact, and I don't even know if I should be saying this, but I know for a fact that there were letters from Julian Assange's supporters that made it to Trump directly. I confirm this. I have not reported it, but so go ahead.
If you wanted to let me comment, my assessment of the section of this Yahoo News report that says Donald Trump was asked if Julian Assange could be assassinated. To me, what I read when I see that is that Donald Trump was somebody obsessed with the power of the presidency, and he just wanted to know if he could do it. Like, to me, I think he was just asking, like, hey, if I wanted to kill Julian Assange, could I kill Julian Assange? Then, like, what's the answer? And hypothetically, what are the different ways we could do it if I wanted? And it was just like a brainstorm session. And he really was just like into the different powers he had as president. I think that like just that tracks with all 4 years of him being president, where I think, you know, okay, can I push this button and kill somebody with a drone? Like, I mean, I'm really into that. I want to know, like, what can I do? Could I kill that guy? Could I kill this guy? And it just seems like that's
it turns out with
Trumpian.
Soleimani, the answer was yes.
Yeah.
Hey, before we shift gears, I just wanted to ask Kevin one other sort of speculative question. If we come to the conclusion that the whole claim about the Clinton emails was not Russian connected, and if we look at this new Yahoo report, and I thought the most sort of wild part of the report was when they talk about a Russian airplane taking Assange out, and to me, when I read that, I was thinking that, well, they probably just threw that in there to help them justify creating these all these plans. I mean, if they have 3 blocks ringed with agents, how would they think he could get I mean, have you ever been to Heathrow or these airports? Like, how to get him to an airport and out on a Russian airplane just seems so ludicrous to me. So if that's the case, I'm just speculating here, then there could have been a real on the part of the CIA, a real agenda to connect Russia to Assange and to really demonize them in that way. I know Assange had a show on RT briefly, so obviously there was communication, but it seems to me with the whole Russiagate phenomena that would have really fit into national security talking points to go after WikiLeaks to make it look like it was a Russian op.
Well, if you're making a list of like the top 50 reasons why the CIA should be abolished, I think that part of the article where they talk about a shootout on the streets of London might be one of the things you put in your top 50 somewhere. I don't know. It's for another day to figure out exactly where you would rank it. But I would imagine the fact that you have real people who were supposed to take as sane individuals talking about how they're going to shoot at cars, explode a plane tire, or whatever they're going to be doing. And apparently they even seriously asked the British representatives or these British officials if they would shoot the tires for them so that it would not come out that Americans were the ones that did the shooting, which is like the psychopathy there is off the charts of what we're talking about here. And so I think that like
it's almost hard to believe like it could have been a cover story to justify other things.
So here's what's really important is the CIA actually had no evidence. And this is in the Yahoo News report. So this isn't me. I'm citing a part of the report, even though like I could say this on my own and make my own arguments. But I feel like it's really good that establishment journalists here printed that the CIA could not prove that WikiLeaks was directly receiving documents from the Russian government. And so what did they do? They came up with this whole business about labeling it a hostile entity. So typically they might have just said, oh, they're working for the Russians, let's go after them. But they had to come up with this other way to do it. So a lot of this Russian talk is really just for I'll use Aaron's term, the Blue Anon crowd. I mean, it's just for this cult. But really, and like what's interesting about the story is that I think on one hand, it's okay. But on the other hand, because we've been so inundated with a lot of falsehoods and conspiratorial crap. I think it's really unfortunate that this team of reporters didn't put in the counterpoints from the actual truth from the Assange legal team, because you've got all of this stuff in there about how agents think it's probable. They think that Russia might spirit him out of the country. They think that he might be whisked off to the Ecuador embassy in Moscow. Well, did you ask the legal team if this is what the plan was? Because they'll tell you that that's not how it was going to go down. Amal Clooney was part of the Assange legal team. This is, George Clooney's wife. And the plan was to make him like a technology minister and give him diplomatic immunity, and they wouldn't have to go to any other country. They didn't need Russia's help. They would get him out of the embassy by having him leave with diplomatic passport or something like that. And that's what the CIA was freaked out over, is that they had come up with a way to leave the embassy, but they didn't need Russia to do any of this at all. That's just a bunch of like blue and nonsense.
What really bothered me about Aaron Mate and Isakov's interview, not Aaron Mate, of course, but Isakov.
I was gonna be like, wow.
was how he said, look, I'm not trying to say whether or not the Russians had a plan to exfiltrate Assange from the embassy. What I am reporting and what I have confirmed is that the CIA believed that. And it's like, okay, how do you know that they believed that? How do you know that wasn't an excuse of theirs? Do you have like some kind of mind reader technology?
But then more importantly, it's the job of journalists to put out objectively what's true. So you quote them and then you say, but we looked into it and that was never going to happen.
Or they said that, even they say they believe would be better than we can confirm they believed, because you just can't. So leaving that issue at that. And again, might as well go 3 for 3. I want to thank you, Kevin, for this. When you reported on the Assange trial, I've been up all night, not able to sleep until I start seeing your tweets. So, I mean, that's true. It's a really troubling case, and it gets to, I think, a lot of people that do investigative reporting. It hits us pretty hard. So thank you for that. Jeb, moving over to your story, where was George W. Bush speaking? What was he talking about? And what motivated you to go and shut down that conversation?
Okay, well, I'll get to that. But first, I wanted to say thanks to Alex and Mila for having me on. And the first time I ever knew of Alex was he was hanging out of the window of the Venezuelan embassy with hundreds of right-wingers yelling up at him, saying, we're sorry you don't have your cigarettes.
I got him now.
So, okay, in regards to last Monday, I guess a week and a half ago now. So I've been involved with anti-war activism, like all of you, for a while now, and that's really how I got politicized in the early 2000s, marching in Los Angeles, where I did when I was a undergraduate student at Cal State Long Beach. We on the day of the invasion of Iraq, we organized a protest, and we actually got out right on the off ramp and blocked part of the 405 freeway, which is a major freeway artery in Los Angeles into Orange County, and we walked up right by there, and there were helicopters, and it was a big thing. So that's been sort of like a formative experience for me. And the big contradiction, though, is that while I was real active in this, I have a lot of family members that have been in the military. My father was in the military during the Vietnam War and became a conscientious objector, and was actually put in like a prison in San Diego and like straitjacketed, force fed. There's a good documentary called Sir No Sir that looks at conscientious objectors during the Vietnam War. There were about 60,000 And there was a lot of activism and like underground zines, and it was a big thing. And so that my cousin, the one that I yelled at Bush about, he was also in the military. He joined prior to September 11th. Like a lot of people, sort of getting out of high school and not knowing what to do, and Army recruiters coming at him and telling him that that he could have this great life. And so he joined the military, and when he got back from his second tour of duty, he was just like a scarred person, and just like, I mean, it's a day-to-day thing with a lot of issue, a lot of difficulties with the family, with him, with drugs and jail. Also, I mean, it's a long list, and really connected to that experience and being in Iraq. And even before that, in Kosovo, he had a kid that was shot in front of him that they were feeding candy to, and a soldier dropped their carbine, and it shot through the stomach of a child. And that was in Kosovo, so it was much worse in Iraq. And so with that sort of family and the political experience, I felt, when I saw that Bush was coming to talk, that he was doing this, what I call the West Coast warmonger tour, where he gave a talk in LA and in Long Beach, where I'm living right now. And he's, you guys see it. He's being rehabilitated in the liberal media on MSNBC, and that sort of bipartisan foreign policy blob, that has really glued onto him. And so he gave a talk in LA on what was that night? The night before, let's see, today's the 30th. Yeah, he gave a talk in LA on September 19th, and Mike Preisner, who was an officer in Iraq, and had a number of friends that have died after the war, went through a lot of PTSD and all the baggage that comes with that. And so he disrupted that talk. And I had actually never met him before. It wasn't like a thing we planned together. I bought my tickets a few weeks before. So I went to that event on Monday, on the 20th. And it was at one of these kind of big orchestra type gather, like if you've ever been to like an opera, or, it's like one of these huge, fits about 3,000 people. And I bought a ticket. His video, if you watch it, is really, really powerful. And he had the video of him. He was kind of near the aisle, so they pulled him out. I was more up front, towards the middle, so you could hear my voice on their microphone with that video clip that you've seen of Bush responding. Yeah, and I just said I wanted to make it personal, because I thought that was a way that the audience would actually listen to me if I started off with that this is like this is like wrecking families. And I said to him, your war has destroyed my cousin's life, or the life of my cousin. And then I said, you created a nightmare for my family. And the whole audience was sort of like, oh. And then, but about 15 or 20% of the audience started booing pretty quickly. This wasn't like a GOP event, or it wasn't a MAGA type event, where you're going to have these big muscle heads choking you out. So it was more of like a sort of a New York Times bestseller, elite sort of readers, and CNN, sort of like wealthy CNN viewers. And so yeah, a lot of people listened, and you can play the clip, but about the million dead Iraqis, tens of thousands of dead Americans. I mentioned the white phosphorus on Fallujah. There was just so many other things. I didn't say anything about Afghanistan or Assange, or I would have liked to say something about the coup in Haiti, which the country is still like reverberates up through the situation today, the instability and the just the austerity and wrecking of its sovereignty. So I was really pissed off. I was listening to some loud punk rock music before I went in. I was really angry, and so I drank a lot of coffee. And then after the event, the event organizers came yelling like fuck you, like really loud. They were super angry when the private security and a few people in the audience sort of like pushed me out. And yeah, I was just briefly detained for about 45 minutes. They threatened to tase me, which sucked. I didn't want to get tased. But then they put me in this little like kind of box in this armored car where I had to like fold into, a small ball. It was pretty uncomfortable, but anyways, not important. It's tiny in the big scheme of things. But I think the point though that I take away from it is there were so many people, even amongst the police. Like I had one cop say like he sympathized with me. Another one said that thank you for exercising your constitutional rights. One of the private security guards winked at me and gave me my phone back. And there was a lot of people in the audience that were like, weren't booing, like probably like the vast majority. And there was a big protest in front. There was about 50 or 60 people that protested. So I think a lot of different tactics have to be used to like embarrass these people and make them fearful again. Like Nixon was scared of the anti-war movement. And I think this is important to stop future, stop future wars. The issue I see though is that they're moving to these economic wars. Mm-hmm. That's their real modus operandi for the future.
Yeah. Well, sanctions are mimicking what wars have done in the past. But I think it's very good what you're doing because, I look at the Bush administration, not just him, but there are other people who are involved in really, really heinous, disgusting crimes, just to put it quite bluntly, and are not only are they not, prosecuted legally, but they're celebrated. Even like I remember when I was, looking at law schools, and I saw like John Yoo is at Berkeley, and you see like all of these people who are like, again, they're not just rehabilitated, but they're doing well. They're making good money. They are celebrated and honored by the media, by even so-called progressives, and like, what other options are there at people's disposal at this point? If they can't be legally prosecuted, then yes, we do have to make the rest of their lives, difficult, or at least make it so that they're not going to be publicly honored anymore. So I think what you did is really important. I think it's meaningful to a lot of people. I saw that it even made Arabic language news. And I think, that's very important. I know, just like growing up, like that was my first exposure to politics, was, just going to family dinners and hearing everyone talk about how Bush is like the devil. And everybody kind of has that I think a lot of people, like you said, have that intuition, or they intuitively know that this is messed up, that it's like, it's frankly like it's morally abhorrent.
Yeah, I think also like you were saying, that the outpouring, I mean, there was like 1 million views on the Arabic BBC YouTube video. And I've never like, I've been writing as an academic, doing a little bit of journalist work here and there. And I've never had like, just like the amount of messages I got of people just like writing me, and a lot of people thanking, but I get these messages from people, my family, my cousin died in Iraq from, U.S. artillery strike, or just like all these stories about people. A woman wrote me an email about her husband coming back from the war and the PTSD, and how happy she is that Bush got confronted. So that was like, I had been kind of actually depressed because I've been dealing with, working out things with my cousin a lot lately. And so after getting all those messages, it was like, it's been really nice.
No, it's great. I showed it to my family too, and they all loved it. But so you're just getting like wide scale. I think everyone from the Middle East is very pleased with you.
Pretty much everyone loved it except for MSNBC.
Yeah,
they didn't show it though. Yeah.
No, I know, but I can picture them like seeing like, this guy he's supporting democracy. How dare you?
Did you see Mehdi? I was surprised that Mehdi Hassan tweeted it out. Yeah, and some other people tweeted it out that I was sort of shocked by. I'm like, wow, they would never tweet out anything that
anything else you did.
Yeah. But when you were saying, Mila, about these people like being sort of like rehabilitated and existing in our midst. I taught for a semester at UVA, the University of Virginia, where there's a lot of like children of like Pentagon and State Department blob that go there. And where I was working, I just worked there for one semester, but there was like down down the hall, or like real close to the building next to where I was working, that guy John Negroponte was there for a few years, and he was like, I believe he was the architect of the ethnic cleansing in the Honduras, the indigenous highlands in Honduras. I mean, these are like, this guy's like, I mean, this is like one of those like Nazis that escaped to Argentina, you know, that they like, you know, this guy's like,
yeah. Well, what you're saying actually, like I'm taking a class in international criminal law right now, and we were talking about how Joseph Mengele like lived out his last few days like on the beach in Brazil, and like everyone felt like it was a huge miscarriage of justice. And similarly, we were talking about Bush, and my professor had made this point, like you kill one person, you go to jail, you kill a million, and it's like you get invited to Geneva peace talks, or in Bush's case, you just get completely celebrated. And I think that the whole reason why a lot of I do think international law has had nefarious origins, but I do think as well that a lot of people are drawn to or want something to happen with Bush is because we all know, like deep inside, I'm sure even the Republicans and who support him, or the Democrats that support him, know deep inside that like he is responsible for something that is extremely heinous, and like something that in a just world would be prosecuted. And it is ironic too to see someone like Assange in jail and see, or in and see.
That's why I really like the idea of having both of you on, just to kind of showcase the disgusting dichotomy at play here, where people like Julian Assange, who expose war crimes, are in Belmarsh prison awaiting potential extradition to the U.S., and people like George W. Bush, who's responsible for the deaths of millions of people, are getting huge amounts of money and speaking fees and warm receptions among the political elite of California. Kevin, you want to add anything?
Well, I would like to hear from Jeb, because I've been saying this entire week that what really is the most stunning part of the Yahoo News report is not the specific details of conversations about plotting to assassinate Julian Assange or trying to kidnap him. It's that while they're doing this, they're looking for a legal authority to carry it out, and they believe they could maybe find one. And the same way that they believe that when they target and kill people with remote control aircraft, that they're actually carrying out a legal strike, even though we all four of us here would say you are assassinating people. You have built an assassination complex. But all of them they're sociopaths who believe that they are doing something that's legal. And so you look at this and you think about the last 20 years. I mean, we all just, September has been this reflection on 20 years since the September 11th attacks, and everything that was transformed by the post 9/11 culture, the security culture, as well as the war on terror culture. And there's been impunity for torture. The CIA, nothing happened to anybody. You mentioned John Yoo, who infamously had that conversation at a university about whether it would be legal to step on a child's testicles in order to stop a terrorist attack. And he said, yeah, if that, he said, it might be, or something. He didn't say no. It wasn't. It was really heinous. And so there's been no accountability, because Barack Obama made it his position, the core of his first 1 to 2 years as president was that they were going to move forward without looking backward. And then the rot just continues from there. They developed the targeted assassination program with drones. There's all kinds of things happening with that, but there's the most that happened to the tortures was that they were written about in a Senate study that we'll never read because all 6,000 pages are still classified, and the CIA could probably keep it secret for the next 30 or 40 years if they want to do that. And we read a summary about it, but that's about all. And they made an Amazon movie about it with Adam Driver, but that's about the best we can hope for as far as exposing them. And then James Mitchell and Jessen, the architects, the psychologists that were contracted, they got paid $80 million. They were indemnified by the government. They faced a civil lawsuit. They settled with some of the survivors in the estate of Gul Rahman, who was murdered in the salt pit, this ugly, horrifying salt pit prison in Afghanistan. But I'm sure the amount, which they didn't have to disclose, was pretty small and not what they probably deserved. And so all of this moral rot at the center of our government continues to grow to where now they're having actual conversations, it seems, with people seriously on how they can take out hostile people they believe are enemies of the CIA, like Julian Assange. That's where it's going. I mean, you didn't hold him accountable for torture. You don't hold him accountable for drones. Where does it go next? You don't hold people accountable for mass surveillance and warrantless wiretapping. And the next thing that happens after that is that they're going to start putting people on kill lists who they just think are enemies of the CIA. And they don't want them in the way, so they're going to be trying to whack them just like, mafia might want to do to other people in order to protect their turf. And so that's what they're doing. And it's because of that dynamic that it's so crucial for you, Jeb, and others to go disrupt these officials when they go to speak. Bush is on the list, but you can make a whole list of these war criminals and people who, we need to be dogging their speaking events, like David Petraeus. I think anytime he speaks, people should probably be protesting him because he's a war criminal. So anyways, I don't know what your thoughts are about like the way that, we have this like built up 20 years of impunity that we really need to do something about.
Yeah. Well, I remember like I'm in Canada, so it's like we don't have the same war criminals, but when I used to live in Montreal.
Mila, I love that every episode you're like, I'm in Canada.
Well, because I have to preface, I'm not like, I'm a little bit of in a different context, but I just wanted to say is like I lived in Montreal for a little bit, and Benjamin Netanyahu came to give a talk on one of the campuses there, and it's like it's a huge story in Montreal. There's a documentary that was made about it because a bunch of students went to, I actually think Aaron Mate was in the documentary too. Like he was one of the students that disrupted it, but there was a huge blockade and Netanyahu was not able to speak at the university. And I just remember there was such a big uproar about it, but at the same time, it did get people talking. And similarly, I think, here you're getting people talking about the fact that these are people who are like, I think at first, in the first layer, it's like, how dare these people disrupt these events, right? Like you were saying, some people thought you were, or Bush said you were being disrespectful to the audience or something. And similarly, there was a lot of discourse here about how, these college students, they're being disrespectful. They don't want to hear other opinions, blah, blah, blah. And like, typically I'm like, there's a difference between like, whatever, shouting down Ben Shapiro on your campus versus like, having an actual person who is responsible for mass murder being, not, like I said, like celebrated, because essentially like these people come to these places and they're honored. They're not just they're not expressing their opinions, which like we already know what they are. They're just being, held up. They're being paid a ton of money, and I've seen very similar discourse that I saw with the Netanyahu thing, over with what's happening with you and Mike, except now this is like years later. I'm seeing actually a lot more support for what happened with you and Mike. And so I'm kind of like, maybe people are starting to see the light, or maybe everyone's just getting really fed up because we're just starting to see how time and time again, these war criminals are never getting prosecuted, and they never do unless they're like African. Like if you look at the history of the ICC. Yeah. So anyway, good on you.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything, Alex?
No, I think I'm good. If you guys have anything else you want to add, feel free. If not, we'll wrap up. I know Kevin had some time constraints, so
no, I hung around because Jeb was here, and I liked hearing what he was saying. Another thing that's worth pointing out is that I got to talk to Abby last week, Abby Martin, and she said that Mike's video, the video of him disrupting, was really huge on TikTok, and that there were a lot of young people, and she was actually hearing from parents who have students in like middle school and high school that like these kids were going, they were talking to their friends about seeing this clip of Mike disrupting George W. Bush. I don't know what kind of how far your video managed to spread, Jeb, but it's really fascinating to think that like there's this generation that doesn't really know George W. Bush, and they might have been learning through this clip on TikTok. And that's why I think ultimately, I know that there was something that was, Abby said that it got taken down because it was like labeled as harassment or bullying by TikTok. And like, I imagine they were really panicked because millions of people who were young were looking at this, and like that was their introduction to George W. Bush. And they probably went and looked at the Wikipedia or, but they were probably like listening to what you said or what Mike said. And they were like, this sounds like George W. Bush was like not a good president.
Yeah.
Not a good president, but like a killer.
War criminal.
Yeah.
So as of now, the video I posted on my Twitter, it's had like 1 million or a little over 1 million impressions. I know the BBC videos had 1 million watches, and it was amazing because it had like 40,000 thumb up votes and like 600 down votes. And so that's a pretty amazing ratio. Have you ever seen a ratio like
that's great.
40,000? Yeah. So in a way, it's in a way he's sort of a soft target, right? Because hatred of George Bush is probably one of the only things that like unites like all like American leftists. So like people were tweeting it out that normally would like not agree with me on a lot of issues. So, but at the same time, because he's a former president and the notoriety, I think disrupting him and sort of making him like the new Kissinger that like, we constantly are like going after, I think it's a good strategy, like a shut down Bush strategy. Every time he gives a talk, a donation, he's just like for the next like 40 years, like he's just like, it's just like constantly being shut down. I think that would be amazing. There's even been talk by some people about like starting some sort of group to raise money to pay for people if, to like have it coordinated, to shut down his talks wherever he goes.
Well, who are the Bush administration officials that still go speak? I mean, we're rid of Donald Rumsfeld, so he can't go. And Dick Cheney doesn't do talks.
Wolfowitz. Does Wolfowitz talk? I don't know,
but
I don't know. It'd be nice if there was actual real left critique of.
Yeah,
I'd like to see a real left critique of Liz Cheney.
Yeah, well, I think
because she's being pushed by the liberal mainstream pretty heavily, and not that she's directly responsible, but she's certainly never spoken out against her father.
I think.
Well, yeah, and I think also she's adopted a lot of the neocon like ideology. I don't know. I think when we say left too, I'm not really sure what we mean, and we've talked about this on the show before as well. But like the American left, like I don't even know who they are because they seem very fragmented. A lot of them seem sympathetic to the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party is completely sympathetic to these neocons who they tried, and like Biden's from that era. Biden is a neocon. They partnered up with neocons and with Bush to beat Trump. So I'm not really sure. Like, I think if the left is going to be united against Bush, they need to completely drop any and all allegiance to the Democratic Party. I don't think they. I mean, that's my
Biden
foreign
was
interference.
the biggest cheerleader in the Senate for the Iraq War. And even during the campaign, there wasn't really much of an emphasis on that. Sure, I mean, I think it was discussed to a degree, but there wasn't that much of a pushback against his role in supporting. I think actually was it Chip Gibbons who did a great piece on that, but.
Well, Branko's done some pretty good stuff for Jacobin, really calling out the Biden love fest that has existed among the progressive left. Branko Marcetic. But yeah, I'm not just here to boost the Jacobin magazine. I'm not a subscriber. But
for the record.
But I do have a couple people I know that have been good to my work, so I treat them kindly. But it is interesting though, because we had the withdrawal of U.S. military forces from Afghanistan, and George W. Bush was someone who was against it. He was in the press saying this is not something that should be happening, and it's a really sad day for America. And it was a really odd moment because it was things that the Biden administration managed to do that collided with things that the Trump administration were doing, led to this bizarre perfect storm where forces were actually leaving that I didn't actually believe were going to exit Afghanistan by September 11th. I actually believed that 9/11 was going to be this excuse to keep troops in the country for maybe another year and maybe another decade. If we didn't leave now, we were going to stay for another 5 or 10 years. And it was just a really odd time. And when you see what was going on in response, it was that to me is why George W. Bush is so dangerous, because it's he still has this mainstream support for things that he did. And he's still a lot of apologia against him or for him, and people talk in ways that really excuse his record. And so they'll go and ask him, and they'll let him say the thing he's been saying all along about Afghanistan war. And then they'll turn it against Biden. And even though Biden, this is the liberal media establishment, even though Biden's their guy, they're using George W. Bush to criticize the thing that's happening to end a war.
Yeah.
And that's really something that we should consider more deeply. But go ahead.
I think it gets to the crisis of legitimacy that they're facing. That I saw a report out from one of those Pentagon think tanks last year where they were talking about war weariness amongst the American public is really high, and it's something that they're worried about. And I think that the fact that they have to go back and rehabilitate and utilize Bush, with Afghanistan collapsing and all of this, it's a sign, I think, of the weakness, of the system that we live in. But I think it's very important what Kevin was saying about the Patriot Act and the way in which laws, the legal system is being used against Assange and for impunity for other people. I'm getting but I think this sort of present moment and this last 10, 20 years that we've seen this sort of special emergency situation that elites have sort of like used to carry out these wars without declaring wars, and all these proxy campaigns like in Syria with Timber Sycamore and all these things. We also have to see this as part of the the longue durée of the big project of American exceptionalism and empire. Back through the Cold War and the military-industrial complex, and this is like this is a project that's been going on for a long time. This impunity. So we're sort of living under the like latest sort of phase of that. And I think, like Kevin was saying, we should all these different figures, we should be disrupting their speeches, and I agree with that. I think we have to be creative in different tactics that we use, and where you can get, like Abby was telling Kevin, where you can get young people, get their attention. I'm teaching right now at UCLA, and the last few courses I went to, I had students coming up to me like before or after class, and they were saying like, did you disrupt Bush? What? They were like kind of like didn't want to say it loud, or they were like like it's sort of like the rumor. I didn't talk about it. I didn't want to bring it into class or anything. But it was interesting how, I didn't even say anything, but students had found out about it just through TikTok or Instagram or whatever.
I'll let you all wrap, but the last thing I wanted to make sure, I thought it would be good to get Jeb's reaction, is that I found it really disgusting. Not that like anything Bush does isn't disgusting, but like I found it particularly vile how when he was marking 9/11, he was able to like, you're pretty good at using taking a word and adding washing, Alex. I don't know, would you call it Nazi washing, or what he invoked January 6th in order to like basically rehab his legacy. I mean, I thought that like instead of addressing the core failures of his presidency that gave us 9/11 and also everything that went wrong after 9/11, I mean, it's all a massive fail. There's nothing he should not be brought to give any speeches on 9/11. There's nothing he should be allowed to come before us and add. And it was like, in order to not be criticized on 9/11, he was going to pander to liberals and attack everything that happened on January 6th, or single out January 6th. And like that.
Well, it's for the same, I mean, because they want like a new Patriot Act, right? They want to be able to continue to justify these surveillance powers, and they want to drop white phosphorus on Mississippi. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but that to me is something to pay close attention, because that's part of the rehabilitation, right? Like it's not just going to be that he gets off and isn't held accountable for war crimes. It's also going to be that they find a way to like make themselves still seem useful to the establishment.
I thought it was just like he was like spitting on the graves of all those people. And I mean, the thousands that died in 9/11, and then, what happened right after with the wars he started that, have killed millions. And for him to try to say like that's comparable to this ridiculous, far right protests at the Capitol, that there was never a threat of a coup. Like, do you know how strong like the institutions in this country are? I mean, it's been so blown out of proportion in the liberal media sphere. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, for him, it's just a way to sort of like, I think when he came to LA, probably part of it was to meet with people in Hollywood, and it's sort of like, reinventing his image, and like, the next like Netflix documentary. And that for him to do that, to compare like 9/11, and like our domestic extremists and the foreign extremists of 9/11, and there's this parallel between them. Do you think he actually thought that up? There must be some sort of like
you still have a speech. He probably still has a speechwriter.
Yeah, I bet somebody else thought up that idea and was like, hey, this will like really make waves if you do this.
Yeah. I think that they're all part of like a club, right? Or at least he's got like a PR team. Of course, he's got a PR team. I think maybe he'll get a Netflix deal or something, just like Obama did. It's taken longer to rehabilitate him than like Obama was just like a superstar throughout his presidency.
Oh, there could totally be like a Bush Obama podcast where like they're just like buddying it up and.
Well, Obama would have to cancel with Bruce Springsteen, so that might not go over so well.
If someone disrupted an Obama talk and brought up like, you know, you turned Libya to ashes and you know, sending $1 billion in weapons every year to like the Turkish border to get smuggled into Syria. Like if you brought up stuff like that, probably like,
well, thoughts and prayers for that person.
But I mean, I think much fewer people would like boost that. Or
Joy Reid will be calling you a racist. CNN will be showing up at your home, doxing your address. Like
Mehdi Hassan,
thoughts and prayers for that person.
Mehdi Hassan would not retweet that. You know?
No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Once again, Jeb Sprague. He's an academic, occasional journalist, and a great one at that. Someone I've collaborated on with a few of my favorite articles. Kevin Gosztola, editor or founder, whatever we decided earlier, with Shadowproof, runs the Dissenter newsletter.
You got it.
Know, laser focus on the Assange case. Also a wealth of knowledge on whistleblowers. Which I think is lacking. Like, you know, I'll listen to Kevin and I'll hear names about people that were allegedly involved with leaks, and I didn't even know their name because there's just no attention to given, languishing in prison, and you know, no focus on that. So I really suggest checking both of them out on Twitter, just to keep up with what they're doing. They're going to keep putting out great work. So thanks so much, guys, for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I agree.
Thanks, Mila. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.